What's up, y'all? Welcome to another episode of In the Wild. I'm Rayshawn, and for today's episode is going to be interesting because it's hurricane season, and in case you didn't know, last year we had somewhat of a small little storm called Hurricane Helene that really took Augusta by storm in so many different ways. And I thought it would be nice to talk to some of the folks on campus that help keep us safe and prepared, because emergencies, even outside of severe weather, can happen any place, anytime. And I really want to make sure that all of our students, faculty, staff, just Jag Nation in general, are safe and feel prepared. So we're going to talk to John Ryan, who is part of CEPaR, which stands for the Office of Critical Event Preparedness and Response. I think that's right. And he's going to talk to us about all things emergency preparedness and emergency management. So I hope you're ready, Jag Nation, because here we go. John, welcome to In the Wild. We're super excited to have you and to talk a little bit about the very important work that you and your team do. And for those who are unfamiliar, can you start by telling us what is CEPaR and what your role inside of CEPaR involves?
Sure. Well, thank you so much for the kind invitation and the opportunity to share what it is that CEPaR does for the enterprise. So emergency management is the vocation at large. Most people are familiar with emergency management in the context of the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA. Mm-hmm. So when we sort of say, well, what do you guys do? Emergency management sort of falls on deaf ears. It's like, well, do you respond to emergencies? It's like the fire department? It's like, so not exactly. It's a piece of that overarching puzzle. At different layers in our society, the vocation of emergency management gets employed. So FEMA, at the state level, there's GEMA, Georgia Emergency Management Agency, and there's a state level enterprise like that across all of the different states, territories. And then at the municipal level, you have within the state, you have within each county, there's a county emergency management agency. Aside from the municipal employment of the vocation, private entities and public entities like universities also recognize the value in emergency management. And so Augusta University and most all of the universities and colleges across the USG employ an emergency management office. At AU, that's the Office of Critical Event Preparedness and Response, or CEPaR. So CEPaR is the emergency management office for Augusta University. And we are the colleagues of and partners with the municipal emergency management enterprise in both Columbia and Richmond counties. At Burke County to a lesser extent, but we also are familiar with, and I'll actually be out in Burke County tomorrow doing some training with them. But that's sort of who we are and what we do, is emergency management. And my particular role at CEPaR is multifaceted. I have a background in training, curriculum development, delivery, and training on various different topics relative to emergencies and disasters. And so when our director, Joe Weber, doesn't need me to be doing other things, I sort of focus on the development of training curricula for our stakeholders, the delivery of the training, follow up to see where the gaps might be from the training to the actual activation of an emergency operations plan that the training is designed to ensure that the stakeholder is capable of doing during austere times. So training is sort of my lane.
And for those who are unfamiliar, what would you say are the types of emergencies that you guys help us prepare for on campus?
So really, whatever happens to come around, right? So at the FEMA level, they champion a concept called all hazards.
Okay.
And the idea is that you never really know what could be coming. I think we learned that lesson very intimately last year during hurricane season. Preferably, we won't repeat that this year.
Right.
And so far, so good. But all hazards guides us to be as ready as we can be with the resources available, without succinct knowledge of what type of disaster may happen. So we do something called a hazard vulnerability analysis every year, where we look at the community we're responsible for, which is AU and all of our campuses and our stakeholders. And it's a quasi-scientific analysis of what's more likely than less to happen, and therefore where do we stand for that. Natural disasters usually come out fairly high on most every emergency management office's HVA, or hazard vulnerability analysis. And so for us, we're no different. Natural disasters are a concern. And so wind events, waterborne events, ice storms, things that we recognize that we are in a geographical area where these things could happen. And to some extent, they have happened in the past, so it's reasonable to expect that they may happen again in the future. Therefore, are we prepared? And preparation is one of the phases of what we call the emergency management cycle, right? So we have preparation and mitigation, sort of cousins, in the left of bang space before any type of disaster happens. And during that time frame is when we try to ensure that we have our stakeholders are educated on the plan. Right, so we have to have a plan. We have to educate folks on the plan. We have to ensure that the resources, the logistical needs that the stakeholder that understands the plan would need to have access to in order to make the plan come to fruition are available. And if we don't have those resources, do we, at the very least, have a plan for accessing those resources? Do we have partners, perhaps in the county or somewhere else in the state, or if not, somewhere at the federal level? Is that where do we get the things that we would need in order to activate the plan and make the plan work? All of that goes on during the mitigation and preparedness phase, so that we have safe, effective response phase activities, right? So we came out of Helene, although physically damaged because of the storm, we came out of it intact because we had done a good job of preparing, mitigating to the best extent possible for a storm that we really didn't see coming. And then during that recovery phase, the last piece of that continuum that rolls back into mitigation and preparedness is when we asked the hard questions and said, okay, so that happened once. We came out of it okay. We're okay. But if it happened once, it could happen again.
Right.
What should we be doing to prepare better and mitigate deeper than we did the first time around? We weren't really sure that we would ever have a hurricane come up Walton Way. But now that we've seen that can happen, what should we be doing differently? How should we be preparing a little bit better? So natural disasters, waterborne concerns, as I said, we live right next to the Savannah River, so that could always be a concern if the river, should flood. We live in an age now where targeted violence and active type violence is always a concern. So we do a lot of training and mitigation with community partners in that hazard lane, if you will. We've been a key contributor to a community initiative that's referred to as #StrongAugusta, that we work intimately with the Sheriff's Office, the Marshal's Office, the Fire Department, the school systems in both counties to try and ensure that everyone that is in our community can be as ready as they can possibly be to prepare for and survive, God forbid something like that should happen. So all hazards, sprinkled with some common sense, right? We don't spend a lot of time on volcano plans because we don't, live in a region where they have volcanoes. So, but that's what's incumbent for any emergency management offices to recognize what's more likely than less to happen. We only have so much time, so many resources, so many dollars with which to get prepared for anything. So what should we be really concerned with? How do we spend our time and money wisely?
That makes sense, to be prepared for anything within a reasonable degree for our area.
That's right.
So let's talk a little bit more about Hurricane Helene, because I want to say for a lot of us, that was a very eye-opening experience in many different ways.
Sure.
So what does that look like for y'all's team when, I guess, you get that notification from the National Weather Service or from some other entity that we partner with saying, hey, we do have a storm coming. We're not sure what it might look like yet, but we do know that we have a threat coming to campus. What does that look like for y'all?
So that's a great question. And in fact, our team does a lot of that preparedness mitigation activity in partnership with the National Weather Service, right? So we have good relationships with offices in Peachtree City as well as Columbia. So we're sort of positioned in between two really good NWS offices, and we get intel from both of those offices. And what we do is we sort of vet the intel and share it out with the appropriate level of stakeholder, which is in the early days. One of the nice things about natural disasters, to a large extent, is that it does give you a little bit of a warning. Some disasters, active assault, for example, there's no warning. But when it comes to natural disasters like hurricanes, there's usually a time frame left of bang, right, where we can pay attention and get some intelligence from our colleagues. And so when that information comes in, we share that information with leadership and say, okay, so this is what they're telling us right now. This is the time frame with which that is expected to potentially happen. A key thing with natural disasters is the confidence level with which the intel comes in. As you know, it doesn't always happen exactly the way they say it's going to happen 5 days out. It changes a lot, right? Storms get stronger, storms get weaker, storms change tracks, and so tracking all of that is important. So when we get intelligence from the National Weather Service, for example, 5 days out, we'll share it with the president's office and the leadership from across the university, and then we start monitoring that on an active basis. And we'll go into a partial activation of Emergency Operations Center, where we are engaged in monitoring the information and commensurate with the way that the information tracks, standing up different layers of our plan, right? So, and all of the intelligence feeds the actions that we would advise the president and his staff to consider, and then just tracking it from there, just as we get closer. If the storm actually looks like it's not going to veer off and it's getting stronger, then we take appropriate actions to ensure that the students, the staff, and faculty are safe. At the end of the day, that's the overarching goal, is to ensure that everyone stays safe. You can rebuild buildings, you can dry out rooms that have been flooded. But we have to take care of our people, and President Keene has been a key partner in ensuring that everyone understands that message, that our people are the most important thing. So let's take this seriously. It can potentially happen. We have evidence as recently as last September that it does happen. So what should we be doing to prepare? And so we do tabletop exercises. We provide a lot of training for the different stakeholders and work to just ensure that everyone is aware that things like this can happen, and if they start to happen, that they pay attention and get the right intelligence from the right resources.
And speaking of resources, how does y'all's team, I guess, manage so many different opinions coming at you? Because I feel like a lot of people will say, well, I saw this on social media that said this is what's going to happen with this event, or this is what's going to happen, or so-and-so told me this is going to happen, so this is what y'all should be doing. So how do you guys manage, I guess, all of the noise that you get?
That's a great question. And I was actually almost about to talk about social media at the end of my previous answer. So really interesting that you would follow up with that question. Social media is wonderful, but it can be concerning in that it provides us with so many different varied places to get information that is potentially so wrong. So there's a thing in Homeland Security called mal, right? So misinformation, disinformation, malinformation. And so sometimes the stakeholder, our staff, students, faculty, can just be getting wrong information, innocently enough from somebody that's just accidentally putting out the wrong information. That's not the most recent information. You're looking at something from 12 hours ago. We've got information from the National Weather Service or from a more reliable source than wherever you're getting your info, that this is actually, so you have to stay current, you have to stay up to the minute. Sometimes there's malinformation purposely put out, right? And that's another whole discussion that a lot of what we do in emergency management and in emergency response and with those partners, there is also a terrorism aspect to all of that, right? That's another lane that we're not talking about right now, but it's the truth. It's part of the world we're living in. Purposely misleading people to get them to do certain things is a tactic of an adversary, whomever that may be. But to answer your question, building relations, so we like to say that emergency management is all about relationships. Building relationships in that left of bank space on blue sky days when there's no storm, there's no river flooding, right? So that the stakeholder, the staff, the students, the faculty, as well as the leadership all view CEPaR as a reliable source of information, right? And working with DCM and the public information component, right? So in an incident management matrix, there's a public information officer component, and that is where we want our stakeholders to get our information from, right? We can't shut off the rest of the internet during an emergency and say you can only get your information from here. What we can do on blue sky days is build the relationships and create fertile ground where our stakeholder wants to get their information from us, right? Without regard to what it may be saying on Twitter or X or Facebook or wherever, right? There's too much, there are too many unknowns in those other lanes where information can come from, and we want to create the desire for our stakeholders to get their information from us. And that way we can help them to get timely, accurate information that drives them to take the safest actions possible so that we can have the most favorable outcome, which is to keep everyone safe. It all goes back to keeping everyone safe.
Yeah, and I think the timely aspect is a good point to mention, because I remember during the first days of the aftermath of Hurricane Helene, I was on Facebook and I was posting daily updates just for people who were curious to know how I was doing or how Augusta was doing if they weren't in the area. And probably like 3 or 4 days later, and for me, my power had been restored, and don't want to say I was good, but compared to some others, I was in a decent spot. And I get this call from my mom, and she's like, you told me that you were fine, and you posted on Facebook that you're still without power. What's going on? And I was like, Mom, I think you may have been looking at a post from the other day.
Sure. Yeah. Sure.
And she was like, oh. And so I feel like that's probably a similar experience that other people may have with some of their other resources of like, oh, well, this is what this says. Well,
it's 12 hours old. It's 3 days old.
You
have to. It has to be timely and accurate and up to the minute. And we get that information from our national partners, and it is incumbent upon us to ensure that we share it with our stakeholders in a timely fashion. Mm-hmm. And the Public Information Office at DCM and their partners in the public information offices around the CSRA, the delivery of timely, accurate, consistent messaging is really important to the citizenry, and that's the citizens count on the Public Information Office at each of the different emergency management offices to be delivering that. It has to be consistent. The public doesn't know what to do, and they're counting on us to tell, this is what has happened, this is what it means, and this is what we need you to do next. And if those messages aren't consistent across enterprises, then the stakeholder gets confused, and then they go to X. Then they go to then we're going down the wrong path here. We need to be reliable sources of information for our stakeholders.
And I want to say for our area, especially during the hurricane season, it is reasonable to expect that we will get some bad weather at some point.
Sure.
Hopefully not to the same extent of Hurricane Helene.
Preferably not.
But what are some general, just like best practices or safety tips that we could be doing, whether we are an employee and we have our own homes, or maybe a student who lives on campus? Like, what are some best practices to prepare for bad weather?
Sure, great question. We like to say that all disasters begin and end locally. And when you take that literally, locally means at your house, right? So it all starts at home. We cannot expect employees, stakeholders to be part of an enterprise response if they're not prepared at home. The CSRA can't expect Augusta University to be part of a regional counties-wide response if things aren't intact at Augusta University. The state of Georgia can't expect the CSRA to be part of a successful, safe, statewide response so it builds, right, all the way up to the federal government. But it starts locally, and that means at your house. So hopefully, coming out of Helene last year, if folks had not taken heed to the need to have 3 days of water and some non-perishable foods at their home, right? then they survive to lean, and they recognize that, you know what, I probably should have paid attention to that advice. If that happened once, right, where are they? They're in the recovery phase of that continuum, right, going back into preparedness and mitigation. And so they say, maybe I'm going to go ahead and get, 5 or 6 gallons of water to keep in the pantry and some non-perishable food that I could eat even if I have no electricity or no way to cook it, right? Do I have some way to stay cool or warm, right? Just things at home. And there are resources and places, and we do a lot of the training at CEPaR, but the American Red Cross, the American Heart Association, Citizen Emergency Response Teams, we work a lot with an organization called Do One Thing. And so Do One Thing champions a year-long effort where you do one thing every month. You're not overwhelmed with getting prepared. A lot of times people fail to get prepared because once they start and they realize how unprepared they really are, it just becomes overwhelming. And so they just stay unprepared. But if you just do one thing a month, in January, you work on the water. In February, you work on the non-perishable food. In March, you work on blankets and some type of backup power. So if I need to stay warm or cool, I have some way that I can hook fans. Do we have some type of a generator, right? It doesn't have to be a $15,000 whole house generator. That's overwhelming. Most folks can't do that. But do I have some type of backup power plan, right? Having a plan is key. And so one time for one thing every month, you do one thing. And by the end of 12 months, you're more prepared than you were the year before. And so being more prepared locally at home to survive for up to 72 hours, right, with water, food, and a sustainable environment, whether that's warmth or cooling, with some type of backup power. Having medications, right? Having some backup medication on hand in case, when the storm hits, you're down to the last 2 pills that you have to take every day, and you would normally be going to get it refilled in 2 days, but that's not available, right? So throughout the year, try and, create a stockpile of whatever it is you might need, be it food, water, comfortable environmental, all of that. Just, it all starts and ends locally.
Yeah, and it's funny that you mentioned Do One Thing, because I literally started doing that after Hurricane Helene, because I was like, oh, it would have been nice if I had some of these items. So one of the first things that I bought was a rechargeable fan.
Good for you.
For myself, because I was like, oh, because I had a small handheld one, but I was like, oh, wouldn't it be nice if I had a little bit larger one so if the AC goes out?
Yep.
Again, buying the water, which I feel like for a lot of folks, being able to get access to some water to hold on to is fairly simple.
Sure.
So you don't have to make a huge investment there to store some water. And then, with the non-perishable food, are those basic things. Is there anything else that you could think of, maybe for students living on campus, that might be a nice to have?
So the other thing, one of the main concerns is always communication, right?
Oh, yeah.
Having a communication plan for how will I get in touch with folks to let them know that I'm okay or that I need help. Right, and so thinking about that in advance. What is, everybody more or less nowadays lives with their cell phone, and so if cell phones go out, right, for a short period of time, what is the backup plan for that? How am I going to let mom and dad or know that I'm okay, or someone more in a more local communication modality know that I'm not okay? How do I, knowing where to reach out for help? And so sometimes that can be as simple as getting to know your neighbors a little bit, right? Having some sort of a community engagement during the blue sky days. If that just means knowing the other people, we sort of in the 21st century have become siloed to where it's like, I don't need anything, I got all this. And that's true as long as everything's working. When things don't work anymore, right, that's when I'm going to need some help from you and you're going to need some help from me. And if we've never met before, it can sometimes be a little bit of a learning curve. So having some type of community engagement during the blue sky days to where I know my neighbor, or I know the person down the hall, or I know the RA, and I know that we're in this thing together, right? We've talked about, the possibility that things could go off the rails a little bit. They did last year. Let's sit and talk about that, And so we're available for that, to come out to to housing, to go to, we just did some amazing training just the other day with athletics, and really looking forward to reaching more departments within the university. But, coming out and in person, sitting down and talking about things like this, to where it's not just one time on a podcast where they hear some good ideas, but we that's part of what we do, is build relationships, right? Emergency management's all about relationships, and building relationships with our stakeholders, person to person, in real time, and say, okay, how well are we prepared here at Oak Hall? What could we be doing differently? Let us bring our expertise and the lessons learned that we have from our colleagues around the world in the emergency management vocation, and bring them to life at Oak Hall, at Elm Hall, at athletics, at the, wherever, University Village. But whatever we need to do. But we want to be a partner with all of the stakeholders across the institution.
I love that. And for those watching, stay tuned, because we got more with John when we come right back.
A movement starts with purpose, a reason to come together. Cancer impacts us all, but together we can change the future. Paceline is a movement of communities and organizations setting the pace to end cancer. Every year, we join forces as teams and individuals to make an impact. 100% of every dollar raised fuels innovative cancer research at the Georgia Cancer Center. Research that leads to breakthroughs, brings hope, saves lives. And now, that movement is growing. Whether on 2 wheels or 2 feet, you choose how to be active. Because every pedal, step, and mile makes a difference. We walk, we run, we ride, we move with purpose. We set the pace to end cancer. Because together, we are stronger. Together, we are Paceline.
All right, and we're back with John Ryan from CEPaR. So, John, talk to us a little bit about the safe stations. I feel like that's something that's a little new with our campus.
Absolutely. It's new, and it's something that we're really proud of. All hazards, as I mentioned earlier, right? So not being myopic in your preparedness efforts, and getting overtly prepared for one thing when in fact you've not paid any attention to you. None of us have a crystal ball, so you just don't know what's going to happen. And so being as prepared as you can, not just at the emergency management level as practitioners, but for individual stakeholders, right? Recognizing that things happen, and I want to be able to survive and have the most favorable outcome no matter what. And so employing that mentality amongst our stakeholders, and then giving them the tools with which to bring that mentality to life, heaven forbid they need to, that's really important to us. So we have a colleague, Jennifer Sosby, who has done an amazing job of being the lead on the Safe Stations project that we've worked with several entities around the institution, environmental health and safety, student health, athletics, housing, and then with CEPaR sort of as the guidance to bring it all to life. And so the safe station idea takes the ages-old concept of there's a fire extinguisher, everybody knows where the fire extinguisher is, and building that into a location where there are tools and training, just-in-time training modalities to prepare the stakeholders to respond to more than just a fire, right? So what we've done is taken a cabinet, and in the cabinet there's the AED, which would be utilized during the sudden cardiac arrest, right? So we go around and we teach everybody CPR and AED usage. So heaven forbid we find ourselves in a situation where someone has had a heart attack or sudden cardiac arrest. In the safe station, there's an AED. There's also just-in-time training available through QR code access
Oh, wow.
on how to do CPR. Should a stakeholder either forget in the moment or due to the stress of the moment, or if we haven't reached them somehow and they have not had any training, there's just-in-time training available, right? So for sudden cardiac arrest and heart attack. So the AED is there. Bleeding control has become a concern in our society over the past 20 years or so, and people get cut, bleeding. If the right vessel in your circulatory system is severed to the right degree, you can bleed to death relatively quickly.
Oh, wow.
People don't really realize that, right? But if your brachial artery or femoral artery are cut, you can bleed out pretty quick. And so the knowledge, skills, and ability and tools with which the stakeholder needs to save a different stakeholder's life, right, is key. So we have a stop the bleed kit, right? So we go around, in addition to training on the CPR, we training on bleeding control. And so the kit with which to bring the bleeding control skills to life are there in the stop the bleed kit. The use of the tourniquet within the stop the bleed kit is a key component of the bleeding control, the stop the bleed training. So you've got the medical emergency represented by the sudden cardiac arrest or heart attack, and the AED and the CPR. You've got the traumatic emergency where somebody could be bleeding to death, and there's no time to wait on the ambulance or the fire department or the first responders to get there. Again, you can bleed out in 3 or 4 minutes if the right vessel is severed to the right degree. So we've got to be able to stop that bleeding. The stop the bleed kit is there for that. We find ourselves as a society now entrenched in this opioid crisis, okay? And so we really have to make sure that we give our stakeholders the right tools and knowledge with which to recognize opioid overdose when they see it, and to bring somebody back to life from the opioid overdose and get them the care and help that they need. So there's Narcan in the safe stations. And so the training that we deliver includes opioid recognition, opioid overdose recognition, and the use of the Narcan, and the importance of that chain of survival that includes that 911 call to get folks to definitive care in a timely fashion, or else they won't have favorable outcomes. As well as the whole station is built around the location of the fire extinguisher. And so we work with our fire marshal to ensure that everybody understands how to use the fire extinguisher, how to keep a small fire small, and the whole idea of pass, pull the pin, aim at the base of the fire, squeeze, and sweep, and just empowering people to be prepared to recognize emergencies and give them the tools with which to do something about the emergency to keep it manageable. And then of all of those things, the training includes the 911 call, right? So we've got 721-2911 is our Augusta University Police Department, and that will facilitate the transfer of the call to Richmond County 911 if the emergency warrants. But the chain of survival, as I said, getting the right responders inbound to supplant the efforts made by our immediate responders. What we're trying to do with the safe stations is create immediate responders, somebody that can step in the gap in between the 911 call and the arrival of the first responder and stabilize the patient, stabilize the situation to have the most favorable outcome.
So if there was one big thing that you would want everyone to know if they walk past the safe station, what would you say that would be?
Recognizing the location. Okay, what I teach folks and have been teaching folks for years is to have situational awareness. So when you walk through Oak Hall, when you walk through Allgood Hall, when you walk through anywhere, not just on campus, but anywhere out in your life, right? Recognize where the tools are that you may need. Okay, so where is the AED in the James Brown Arena as you're walking around? Where is the fire extinguisher in Oak Hall as you're going to class? Where are these things, right? So making an imprint on your subconscious as to, if I ever need that, that's where it is, right? There's copious studies done and research delivered on the way that your brain works during a disaster. And the first thing that your brain is going to do, and there's nothing you can do about it, is deny that the disaster is actually happening. Your brain will try and find ways to tell you, so the first thing is, what I like to teach folks is you have to get out of denial, right? So, and that's recognizing what could happen around here. So is this possible? Once you are bought in subconsciously on, yes, it is possible that this could happen, then when it actually happens, you're going to have a higher likelihood of getting out of denial faster, right? And so when you get out of denial, the second phase is deliberation. And what I like to say is it's like a Rolodex or index cards in your head. It's like, I'm out of denial. I recognize that this emergency really is happening. What do I do? What do I do? What do I do? And deliberation. And part of the deliberation should be successfully getting from deliberation to decisive action should be that knowledge of where's the safe station, right? If I jump out of denial and say, okay, this is really happening. This really is sudden cardiac arrest. That person really is bleeding. There really is a small fire. Oh my goodness, this looks like opioid overdose. Out of denial, it really is happening. Then deliberation, what do I do? Safe station, I remember that, and I know where it is here in Oak Hall, University Village, wherever it is, right? And so then you get to decisive action, which is the delivery of the right tool and the right training to save somebody's life.
And I guess just to shift gears for just a second, how did you get involved in this type of work? Like, or maybe when you were a little boy, you always knew you wanted to go into emergency management, but yeah, what did that look like for you?
That's a great question. I don't know. By the grace of God, I would say. I grew up in New York City, and the school that I went to was right across the street from FDNY station.
Okay.
So there was always a firehouse right there coming out of school. I don't know if that has anything to do with it or not, but I spent 34 years in the fire service, and the last 10 or 12 was spent in an administrative capacity as a training officer, and the all hazards mindset that I mentioned earlier from FEMA sort of started to take root around that time. So I'm in the fire service as a training officer, now training my people on all hazards, not just fire, but fire and emergency medicine, not just fire and emergency medicine, but fire, emergency medicine, and hazardous materials. Active shooter, severe weather, right? So this whole all hazards mindset sort of seeped its way into my professional life. And that yielded an interest in emergency management. So I started pursuing my certified emergency management designation while I was still in the fire service. And then when it came time for retirement, which retirement comes to us all, but I became eligible to retire from the fire department, and the transition from administrator in the fire department to emergency manager just seemed like a logical pathway. And I said earlier, relationships. I had spent 20 years here in Augusta, 25 years here in Augusta, building relationships. And part of those relationships included people here at Augusta University that I'd either developed exercises for, delivered exercises for, was the evaluator on their exercises. So I knew people here, and they knew me. And so the logical thing was for us to start to work together. And that ended up me here working here, and it's been a blessing.
Well, we appreciate all the work that you've done to make sure that we stay safe. And another thing I think that is really important for our campus to know about is Jag Alert. Could you talk a little bit about Jag Alert and why people should make sure their, I guess, contact information is updated for Jag Alert?
Absolutely. So we mentioned earlier the importance of communication, right? Of being able to contact your folks, be able to contact somebody and let them know that you're okay or that you're not okay. Communication is key. We have to have, in order to have good relationships, you have to have good communication. And that doesn't become any more important. It can't be any there's not a situation where it's any more important than when on the beginning moments of an emergency, right? And so having the stakeholder know that something is happening, okay, and this is what we need you to do. The mechanism for the delivery of that messaging is called mass notification, right? There's a whole component of the emergency management world called mass notification. And so our mass notification tool on the user end, right, the stakeholder end, is the Jag Alert. There's software in the background that our vendor provides us with, and it's staffed by CEPaR and the Augusta University Police Department. There are all of the, I talked earlier about the hazard vulnerability analysis, the things that are more likely than less to happen here. So we have plans for that, all of that, what I said earlier about the training. Same thing on the back end of the Jag Alert in the software that the vendor provides. We take those same more likely than less things and make sure that we have messaging already prepared for those things. If the river floods, if there's severe weather, if there's an active assailant situation, if there's whatever these situations are that our HVA tells us, you should probably be prepared for these things. Being prepared for them includes messaging your stakeholders and letting them know in a timely fashion, and sometimes that can mean within seconds, that this is happening, right? So where is it happening? What do I need you to do next? Okay, is it an evacuation request? Is it a shelter-in-place request? What is it? What do we need people to know? And so that relationship that we build with our stakeholders during the blue sky days includes encouraging them, imploring them really, to ensure that you do not opt out of the Jag Alert, okay? That you should be in the Jag Alert because this is where your important messaging is going to come from.
Right.
And that your contact information is current. It doesn't do you any good for me to be contacting an email or a telephone number that you no longer are associated with. I have important information that I'm trying to get to you, to all 30,000 of our stakeholders, right? How do we get the information to that many people? And the other thing that I want to mention too is the judicious nature with which we utilize it. We're not gonna send out trite, mundane messages to get to the point where you're like, oh, it's just another message from CEPaR. It's just another message from the Jag Alert from AUPD. We're only sending messages when it's important for you to listen. Communication is a two-way street, right? So if we were just sending out all types of, messages all the time, eventually that wears thin on you and you stop listening. And so we don't do that. If you get a message, if you get a Jag Alert, it's because it's important.
For sure. Yeah. And as we kind of wrap up here, are there any, final thoughts that you might have for someone who's trying to be prepared for hurricane season?
So the first thought I would have would be to say thank you for desiring to be part of the solution. So many people just sit back and think, well, this is, somebody else will just come. Nobody's coming to save you in the early hours, right? All disasters start locally. You have to be prepared. So thank you for recognizing that, and know that it can be done. It doesn't all have to be done at once. It can be overwhelming. We've all been there, and what we're trying to do is be 1% better every day, right? In our lives, we're trying to be 1% better every day, a little bit better than yesterday. So this hurricane season, we want to be a little bit more prepared than we were last hurricane season. And so kudos to the person that is embodying that mantra, and know that we're here to help you. If there's some way that, if you want to run your personal plan by us and say, look, this is what I'm going to do. Does that make sense? Or can you help me find additional resources? Or, what is the plan? How does this work? That's what we're here for, right? We're here for the students and the faculty and the staff. And so thank you for wanting to be part of the solution, and let us figure out ways together that we can have the most favorable outcomes. Nobody has it all figured out, but we're stronger together, and so let us be part of the team that you're trying to get prepared to be successful.
And last question, if someone wanted to, or watching this and they're like, okay, I need to talk to John because I have all these questions about how my team, my department, my unit could, start preparing, what's the best way to reach out? So
we have a 24-hour, again, I mentioned, 24-hour day, 7-day-a-week number, 706-729-2407. And it's a non-emergency number, so it's not in lieu of 911 or 2911, but it's for contact with CEPaR anytime. Okay, you can reach out to us. Also, we're all available by email at CEPaR@augusta.edu. that comes directly to everyone's inbox in the CEPaR staff. And we are very responsive. We'll get back to you in a timely fashion and figure out what it is that we need to do to help you achieve whatever goal it is that you're working towards.
All right. Thank you so much, Sean, for
Thank you
chatting with
so
me.
much, man. It's been wonderful.
And for everyone watching, I hope you have a very safe and prepared hurricane season. All right, y'all, I hope you enjoyed that episode. Thanks again to John for chatting to us a little bit to make us more prepared. I know I still have a couple more things on my Do One Thing monthly to-do list, so I hope you guys are taking some nuggets of wisdom from this episode. I hope you feel prepared. But if not, you can contact CEPaR and they'll be happy to walk with you with trainings and everything else that John mentioned to make sure that we are good to go for this hurricane season and for really any event that might happen. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. Tell us if you did. And until then, I will see you guys in the next one. Go Jags!